Good morning, everyone. My name is Addy, and I welcome you all to the webinar on COR-in-progress employers, key challenges for transitioning to COR 2020. Ain't it a pertinent topic or what? It's been something that's been buzzing in everyone's ears. And we have Sobi Raghunathan, who is an IHSA lead, IHSA core auditor, as well as ISO lead auditor. On this call today, and she's going to be talking about ways of addressing them and first showing you what those challenges are. And we also have John Turner with us. So without any delay, let's move on to the agenda. What's on the agenda today? Why move to COR 2020? After we understand why the move to COR 2020, we'll look at some of the transition timelines of the IHSA and the basic transition planning, after which we're going to look into some of the new core elements of the COR 2020 and the common elements of COR 2020 and COR 2015, and the integrated elements between COR 2015 and COR 2020. So we've divided it into three categories for making it easier for you to understand. So after that, we're going to move into the challenges with element 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 14. These are some of the most elements that can pose challenges from our experience, both as a consultant for 100+ clients, as well as an external core auditor for the IHSA, and some of the general challenges. So before we move in to why change to COR 2020, let me quickly introduce our first speaker for today. Her name is Sobi Raghunathan. Sobi is the IHSA Associate External Core Auditor and Vice President Operations Strategy and Partnerships for us Consulting Services, Inc. And Sobi Raghunathan has been supporting diverse Canadian businesses of different sizes in implementing and maintaining sustainable OHS programs. Sobi is also the lead auditor for the ISO 45001 standard, and she's part of the League of Champions and works constantly with the industry to promote safety leadership. And she sits on the board of governors for Ryerson University. Before I hand it over to Sobi, we have a quick poll that we want to do to understand our audience better today. We've got a set of about 12 participants registered for the webinar today right now. And it'll be great to know where you are in terms of your transition journey, how you're progressing, so that our speakers can calibrate their messaging accordingly. So can I request my backend Zoom team to quickly run the poll so that we can move forward with the webinar. Thank you very much. Here's the poll, as you can see on your screen. Question number 1, is your organization's core certification in progress? So are you core in progress? Yes, no, or are you thinking about core, not yet registered with the IHSA? Please let us know. It'll be good to know. And how are you managing your document and record control? Now, document and record control is going to be a very critical aspect of the COR 2020 standard. And Sobi will be talking a lot about that. And then please let us know whether you do that digitally or manually. And what is your COR 2020 transition status? Are you currently in progress, which is the case with most construction companies, or you haven't started yet, which is why you're here. You want to learn more about how to start and what you need to know, or you've completed it. You've been ahead of the curve. So we'll give you, let's say, a minute more for quickly understanding where you are in terms of your core journey. And then we can start with Sobi. So can I request my team to just wait for maybe another 10 seconds and give us the poll results? Yeah, can we have the poll results, please, on the screen? Here we go. Is your organization core certification in progress? Wow. 92% of the participants say yes. And no to none. And then thinking about core, we do have one who's thinking about core, which is excellent. And how are you managing your document and record control? Sobi, you'll be very happy to see this. 9 out of 12, but 75% are saying digitally, you're on the right track already. Good move. And the third question that we see, what is your transition status? Not started yet, not surprised. 67% have not started yet, but I'm very happy to see 33% are transitioning in progress. Thank you very, very much for spending your time with the poll. So that gives the speakers today a good idea of the audience we have. And Sobi, educate the audience on why the change to COR 2020 was made by the IHSA and the CPO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eddie, for the intro, and good morning, all of you. Thanks for joining us today to learn more about COR 2020 and some of the details into transition or thinking about getting into COR, what you must know about COR 2020. So we had COR 2015, and now we are in COR 2020. Why the change? So simple thing, alignment to ISO 45001. So SOCI program, this is the CPO's Safest Employer program, aligns everything to ISO 45001, and COR is equally as good when you're talking about safety management system, which is very prescriptive in nature. There were few gaps when it comes to document control and maintenance and things like that. That is being bridged. So it's just a few layers that got added and readjustments and alignment. So any organization can choose between ISO 45001 or COR 2020 because both of them are in the same standards. And with that, you should be able to apply for the SOCI program, which is the Safest Employers Accreditation Program. Those were the main changes. WSIB Excellence is a journey towards SOCI or COR or any one of them. It just helps. So that's why COR 2020 came out. Moving on to the details of timelines. Key dates, I'm sure most of you must have noticed this or faced it. Here, December 1st, 2021 was the official cutoff date for any internal audits being submitted with the COR 2015 program outline. So those of you who must have started your COR journey with 2015, you could still had a chance to submit the internal audit with the 2015 standard up to December 1st. Anything after December 1st, 2021, now you do need to make sure you align everything to COR 2020 and then go for your internal audit submissions. So this is mainly for new COR seekers. So those of you who are registered with COR and who have not been certified, who are trying to get your first certification, then your cutoff to utilize the 2015 standard is long gone as of December 1st. So going forward, if you couldn't make the cutoff, now you need to actually realign all your programs to actually meet the standards of COR 2020. The other key date to keep in mind, and this is for many of you to understand this, you may be already COR certified, or you are thinking of actually starting your transition. Any external audit that is done after October 1st, 2022 have to be done in 2020 standards. So those of you who submitted your first internal audit submission for certification, if you submitted before December 1st, it's typically 60 days, give or take, 60 to 90 days, you will get your internal audit reports. Then by the time you call your external auditor to, and the whole audit completed, you're looking at 5 months roughly from December 1st, 4 to 5 months from December 1st to almost like April 1st. So you have the time to actually move. And some of the clients may say, okay, you know what, I submitted, I got my internal audit done, but I still have, you have 6 months before the internal audit really expires. So within 6 months of receiving the internal audit report, you have to schedule your external audit. So you still have time to schedule your external audit based on the 2015 standard if you did submit based on the 2015 standard before December 1st. So I just want to give that clarity to everyone. And those of you who are thinking of transition, a couple of things. If you are already entering into your cycle 2, which is your year 4, that means you have to seek external audit this year. Cycle 2, you need to look for external audit. If your external audit is coming up, so let's say your program is now currently based on 2015 standard, and if you have external audit coming around the same time as October 1st or a little after October 1st, then you better start working on your COR 2020 transition, because you won't be able to do your audit based on 2050. If you were to do your audit based on 2015 standard, it should be done before October 1st. I'll share a couple of scenarios and examples as an external auditor, as well as from a forest perspective. We have over 100 clients who go through COR journey with us, and they are in various different stages. Some of them are in year 4, cycle 2, entering into cycle 2. Some of them are in year 1, year 2, year 3, all over the map. So we do deal with them and guide them through. One of our clients just recently, we were working with them, not recently, I should say December, and their cycle 2 audit is coming up October 31st. So we have already started mapping out and working with them on their transition plan for COR 2020, because it does take time. You do need to align all your documentations, which I'm going to cover, which ones you do need to focus on. And so we started about 10 months ahead, so that when they call the external auditor, that they are calling them to audit them on 2020 standard. So these are key things for you to understand, because there's a lot of confusions happening among clients, companies who are post-certified in terms of their transition journey. I will with one file as an external auditor. They're going into their cycle 2, even though they have time. They have actually done their transition work, and they want us to audit based on 2020 standard. So I'm giving them the option as part of my document review. I'm going to go through the review to see, are they meeting the cut? Because if they don't meet the cut, then they're going to get into corrective action plan, which is going to take more time. They're going to go into pending status, and it's going to take more time, resources to actually get through this audit. So we are giving them the option to say, you know, if you want to get through 15, and if your programs and everything is really well kept to 15, then just go through with 15. If you haven't done a proper transition, you still have time to utilize your 2015, and auditors will still perform audits based on 2015. So stats, right now, I think there's only a handful of companies who have been audited based on 2020 standards. And most of the companies that are performing their external audits, whether for cycle 1 or cycle 2 first year certification, or the cycle 2 fourth year certification, majority of them are still utilizing 2015 standards. And as auditors, we are still performing audits based on 2015 standards that will continue till October 1st. So I really wanted to bring good clarity on that, because I see there's a lot of confusion with this among many COR-certified clients. And IHSA have given us a lot of time for organizations who are already certified up until 2025 to do the transition plan. So thank you, Andy. We'll move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Sobi. Just a quick thing before we move on. I forgot to mention that we'd like to make this interactive. So if you're having any questions, Please post your questions in the Q&A box, which you see either on the top of your screen or on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and ask your questions. And if they're pertinent and we can take during the session or towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sobi.
So a couple of things to pay attention when you are planning your transition for COR 2020. Identify resources, because you really do need to identify, there's going to be quite a bit of work that you need to do. So identify what it's going to take for you to be compliant, allocate the resources that you need to become compliant. Eddie, you could bring up all the other points, please. Because there's going to be quite a bit of work that you do need to do to be compliant for 2020 standards. So you do need to actually have resources who are working on this transition plan, and have a team, define the responsibilities, set realistic dates and milestones, and then make sure senior management is involved in this process. I'm going to keep reiterating senior management's involvement is crucial. I know most of you must have attended many of the OGCA seminar on safety culture. You know, safety culture always starts with senior management. And when we are talking about safety management system is not separate from your safety culture. It is part of your safety culture. And safety management system must have the senior management's backing. If you don't have senior management's backing, the program can go in many different tangents. So please get the resources, have senior management's commitment, have a team, identify the dates, and then move forward. The biggest, to dive a little bit deeper into COR 2015 and 2020 analysis, let's look at what are some of the things that we really need to understand. So in terms of, IHSA has worked out great documents, and there's a lot of reference documents that are available. We are going to be focusing on the new elements that got added, along with common elements that got kind of moved over to 2020, and the integrated elements. So that we always say it's 4 missing major pieces, but it's kind of combined together as document and record control. So document and record control is a major new to the 2020. This is one of the major missing pieces to align with 45,001. And unless you have a robust system in place to capture your version controls, you are going to have challenges. That's why we actually asked the question, how are you tracking your documents? Is it manual? Is it some sort of a digital way? Because if it's you're utilizing some sort of a safety management system, it may be a little easier for you to track version controls and update the updated forms and things like that, because you don't want loose papers that are all dated, different versions being utilized at your sites. Procurement and contractor management. Contractor management used to be just a one line in section 2 of the 2015 standard. Now there is a whole section, and it's emphasizing on a lot of details, especially as a GC. You have a lot of responsibility to manage your subcontractors. Procurement details is also much more detailed requirement that you need to have, so you do need to develop policies and procedures. And the 4th one is on management of change. Management of change it's kind of replaced the element 19, senior management's commitment, to management of change. Management of change focuses on any kind of changes to your health and safety management system, legislative, regulatory, any new changes that's happening that needs to be implemented throughout the organization. So common elements, when we talk about common elements, we are looking at element 1, policy statement remains policy statement in element 1, but they have added a sub-element where it actually has some details on the document and record control. Hazard assessment, analysis, and control, again, is another element that is still staying the same, but there are a little bit of details that got added. Company rules, element number 5 is still the same. Element number 5, not many major changes to that. PPE, personal protective equipment, element 6 remains element 6 with just few changes to it. Preventive maintenance, again, remains the same. There are a few additions and requirements that got added. Same thing with training and communication, element number 8. There are a few details that got added, which I'll be covering in the coming up slides. Workplace inspection remains the same. Element number 9, investigation and reporting remains the same. 10, emergency preparedness is 11. Emergency preparedness now has first aid kind of embedded into that, but it's still 11. Stats and records still is 12. Legislation and other requirements, it is still the same, but it is not as prescriptive. There's a lot of details that they expect you to cover. Management review, which is 19, is now 14.1. So there's a total of 14 elements. The return to work and workplace violence and harassment, along with health hazards, which used to be separate, and first aid, those 4 used to be separate sections. Now it has kind of got merged into the various different elements that exist within 2015, the 14 elements that they have laid out. Moving on to the next slide. So safe work practices and procedures are now all under controls. That's element number 3. Element number 3, you have your hazard assessment done in element 2. Now we are talking about controls. Under controls, you have your safe work instructions, job procedures, all that is going to be under that. And as I mentioned, element 14 is now also under element 13, and legislative requirements is going to fall under the 13th. First aid, as I mentioned to you, element number 15 became obsolete. Now it's embedded pretty much under emergency preparedness, and some of them under workplace inspection and training. Health and safety labs and GHSC, element number 16, they pretty much removed that section and embedded all that into legislative requirement. So is workplace violence and harassment and return to work. Next slide, please, Eddie. So what are some transition challenges? What are some of the major areas that you really need to focus in and take some immediate actions when you are planning on doing the transition? I would say focus on 1.2, element number 3, controls, 4, 7, 8, and 14.2. So 1.2 really starts focusing on document control. As I mentioned to you, this is a huge undertaking for many small to medium-sized organizations, especially if you have a large organization and if you have ISO 9000 already implemented, this may be a very easy thing for you. But those of you who don't have any other standards that you're following, especially small to medium-sized organizations, you may not have protocols for actually maintaining document revisions and record control. You do need to create a policy and a procedure, define the roles and responsibilities, and then you actually start looking at all your documents and consolidating them and bringing that all under one umbrella, so that you have to start tracking any revisions or any changes you make to the document. And when we go out there as external auditors, these are some of the things that we would be making observations of and then verifying, is to see is the document control and record being managed at the site level as well as at the office. Moving on to the next details in regards to document control. Identify any external documents that you would be using, and then reference those in your policies and procedures. Make sure to remove any obsolete documents that you are no longer using, because that's going to confuse your internal staff as well as the external auditors. Retaining records and providing compliance is going to be a huge thing. That's why I said if you have some sort of a safety management system, this is going to ease the process for you. Protection of privacy, confidentiality as appropriate. So these are details that you would specify in your policies and in your documentations. And make sure all your records remain legible. So like with the handwritten documents in the past, we have kind of accepted certain things, but right now with document control, you do need to make sure that you do have everything updated. Thanks, Eddie. Let's move to the next slide. When we talk about controls, health and safety controls, it's element number 2 remains to be element number 2. You're identifying hazards, you're doing everything as you do need to. But the biggest change here is when you're identifying controls. It's a common thing that I notice as an external auditor, or when we are doing gap analysis for our clients. It's a common thing that we identify. Everybody tend to jump to PPE as a means of control. This is a major change for many of you who rely on PPE as a major control. You do need to now look at all the hierarchy of controls and justify and give us reasoning why you are choosing the control and what control are you recommending and what's the reason for your choice. That is the biggest missing piece from 2015 and transitioning into 2020. So it will take some time, especially when you're doing the going back and revisiting your hazard. You need to make sure you realign all your hazard assessments and then look at the controls that you have defined, and then look at why you chose the controls that you chose. And then you do need to communicate that to your employees as well. Next slide, please, Eddie. Procurement and contractor management. Procurement and contractor management is, again, as I told you, it has expanded out to include a lot of details. You need to have a defined policy and procedure for procurement of services, procurement of equipment, whatever it is, there should be a detailed processes. And when it comes to contracting services, there is going to be a lot of responsibility that do need to come from the subcontractors that you would actually hire to work on your project. Your subcontractors now needs to make sure that they're completing hazard assessments. With the 2015 as external auditors, we were not going to the extent of looking at their hazard documents. We looked at your hazard assessments and whether are you compliant with. We didn't go into the extent of looking at their hazard assessment documents. With 2020, these are some of the updated requirements that we will be looking at is your contractors completing hazard assessment? Do they have a good understanding, the competency to identify and control hazards? So again, this is going to force a lot of subcontractors to start looking at their health and safety program. And if they don't have a robust health and safety management system in place, it's time for them to start putting health and safety management systems in place. I would highly encourage as GCs for you to recommend your subcontractors to seek for COR. Then all of you will be in an even playing field. You can be rest assured that the subcontractors who are working on your sites do follow a very good safety standard. They have safety protocols in place, and therefore the chances of them having serious accidents or injuries are minimal. It is a liability, it is a due diligence. So I would highly encourage all of you who are here today, who are GCs. It's a great message that I want to take it out to all of you. Please reach out to your subcontractors and make sure, I mean, auditors, we have seen many different types of documentations, and the common ones we see is people go and download documents and change their names and just put their company name on it, but even the hazards don't align to what they are exposed to as hazards. So it's time for all of us to play in the same playing field, level playing field with safety management systems. So I think this particular contractor management piece has made a lot of changes to put a lot of onus on the contractors who will be working on your projects for them to follow a protocol for safety management. And commit any changes that happens, any OHS related hazards that you identify, you need to make sure that you communicate that to all your subcontractors who work at the. So again, coordinate stuff among the multiple employers who would be working within your site. And there have to be a specific forms for evaluating subcontractors. You do need to identify a process. I know it was one line item in the past. Are you evaluating subcontractors? Now you do need to have an evaluation form for subcontractors, and each and every subcontractors that you have, you do need to do a detailed analysis of their observations, performance, and any feedback that you would give it to them. Moving on to the next major element is 7, preventive maintenance. Majority of the stuff in 7 remains the same. The only major change that you should pay attention to, in the past, pretty much all the employers focused on equipment that they owned to include it into their preventive maintenance inventory. But right now with 2020, you do need to include leased and rented equipment as part of your inventory. And you do need to show some sort of a documentation. If it's leased or rented, they may be performing their cycled maintenance, but you do need to show that in your tracking. With element number 8, training and communication, the biggest change that you should pay attention to, I won't call it change, it's emphasizing more details on the evaluation of learning, identifying competency for each task and role performed by employees. So if an employee is operating scissor lift, we do want to see some sort of a competency done on them performing, operating a genie boom or a scissor lift or a forklift or whatever that they do, that there should be some sort of a competency identified and a tracker for each of the tasks and the roles that are being performed by your employees. Also taking into consideration of the various different responsibilities, abilities, language difficulties, literacy issues that your workers may have. You do need to identify those, and you do need to come out with how you're going to support them. So let's say in some workplaces, it's very common to see, majority of the people speak one language, and they may have language difficulties apart from English. And then in those cases, you do need to make sure that you perform, the documents have to be translated. And when you offer training, you do have translators there to offer the training. So these are some little additions, defined details that got added to the element number 8, along with how do you administer the training. Do you have somebody physical? Is it in-person training that's done physically at your location, or did you send somebody out there? What was the training outline? Who performed the training? If it's online training, who did it? And what was covered? All that should be included. And the next major element that, again, you should really, really pay attention to is 14.2. Management of change. You do need to have a written procedure for that, which includes defining the roles and responsibilities. Then you should go into defining details on how are you going to implement change. Identify what are the changes and how you are going to implement those changes. Changes could be legal requirements. For example, accident investigation. There was an amendment to the Act last year, where you do need to take the details in the regulations, and now it's part of the program. So your policies and procedures need to be updated with such changes, any legislative changes. There must be some sort of a process or a protocol for you to keep an eye out for any kind of legislative changes or regulatory changes that affects your organization and the tasks that you perform within your facilities or sites that you manage. Again, introducing new products, process, services, you do need to again define how you're going to go about procuring that, and then who is going to be involved, how are you going to communicate the new processes, if it's a new product, any additional training, all that needs to be very clearly defined, and there must be paper trail. And as auditors, we will be looking for the paper trails. Applying element 2 and 3 to identify changes, again, the controls, training the relevant parties, all that is going to be part of the management of change.
So before we move on to the next slide, I'd like to first of all take the opportunity to thank the OGCA membership for attending this, because it's an exclusive webinar for OGCA membership. At the same time, I'd like to thank Giovanni and Eric from the OGCA for their constant support in getting all of us together and helping us create a common platform for sharing this kind of information. So I forgot, my apologies, I forgot to thank the OGCA at the beginning of the webinar. And I can't thank you guys enough for on this, and at the same time, Giovanni as well as Eric. Sorry about that, Sobi, all yours.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Eddie. General challenges, again, I would say pay attention to the legislative aspect, because one thing, my advice to a small, medium-sized organization is there is, right now, there's a lot of discussions choosing between COR or ISO 45001, and there are many conversations and communications where people feel ISO is easy to get to COR. One thing I will tell as a safety professional who have been working in the field for the last 22 years, COR is very prescriptive. ISO it's not as prescriptive. You have to just look at their standards, and then based on the interpretation of the standard, you implement the program. If you don't have a structure or a process already implemented, it is going to be quite a bit of a challenge and undertaking for organizations. I would highly recommend small to medium-sized organizations start your journey with COR, which is very, very prescriptive, and it actually tells you what you need to do. Even for subcontractors, as GCs, I would highly recommend all your subcontractors to start seeking for COR. So they all have implemented a safety management system based on a standard that's clearly defined, and it tells them exactly what to do. So the prescriptive nature is very, very helpful. Some of the changes that has happened to align with 2020 COR and 45,001 is they've removed some of the detailed prescription. For example, the requirements of a health and safety rep, joint health and safety committee. It's not as prescriptive as it used to be in 2050. Now, under legislative requirements, you do need to have all this. Workplace violence and harassment assessment, you have to have it done. Just because they don't define it, it doesn't mean that you don't need to do it. These are legal requirements. Therefore, you do need to have a program implemented for workplace violence and harassment, doing the risk assessment on a yearly basis, doing the, just evaluations to make sure people understand that. Having a joint health and safety committee trained, certified, that's functioning. Each site that has more than 5 staff, you need to have a site safety rep, and they need to understand their duties and responsibility. Additional training would be definitely an asset for them. These are things that now you do need to understand and make sure you're compliant with. Because you can't just say, oh, it's not defined in the 2020 standard, therefore I don't need to do it. It's embedded under legislative responsibilities. So employers need to ensure compliance to the entire standard, maintain the required documents and records. Again, record management is a key component of 2020 standard. And some of the transitional challenges that I have seen and I'm witnessing is document control. So again, there are many different versions of documents, various different versions being managed, then you're going to run into issues. Knowing when to do the transition, just like I went over the timelines, plan yourself. Give yourself ample time. There's no need to rush into it unless you have an external audit that's coming up after October 1st. You could plan yourself, space it out. Those of you who are seeking COR for the first time, you will get started right into 2020. So there's no transition. So you know exactly what you're looking at and what you need to build. And even I know from the consulting side from FOVAS, any of the clients that we are onboarding, they have been following the 2020 standards. So it's something that you just need to plan, have senior management's involvement, and the key to sustaining any health and safety management system, middle management involved in the process. It is great to have a safety resource and a resource team if you're lucky, but you cannot just leave all this to them. It is part of everybody's responsibility, and middle management plays a very, very crucial role in this. So that being said, we'll move on to the last slide, which kind of maps out the various different programs that are available. I know many of you would have heard about the Excellence program. Excellence is the only way for rebate from WSIB. So you have to be enrolled into the Safety Excellence program. Excellence program can only be provided by approved providers. There's 20 odd approved providers, if I'm not mistaken, 22 or something like that. The current count, I keep lose the current count. FOVAS is one of the approved provided along with all the other associations. So you do need to register with the approved provider. And if you are already COR certified, you could do the transition, the 4 topics, control of documents, controls of records, contractor management, change management. These are the 4 topics that you could choose as part of the transition and get rebate for it. Once you are COR 2020 certified, then you could apply to become part of SOCI program, so Safest Employers Accreditation Program. Again, there's rebates for that. WSIB will give you rebate. It's a little bit more than the Excellence program. And it is, once you're approved, it's for 3 years. So the calculations are based on the premiums that you pay. If you pay heavy premiums, then you could get a lot more rebate back. We are working with WSIB for our existing clients as part of FORAS. If they do go through any of our programs, we take their internal audit and external audit reports, and we help them out with getting their validation done for the safety excellence rebate. So those are some added support that we are giving to our clients who are FORAS clients, because we are an approved excellence provider. I would recommend each and every one of you take advantage of the WSIB excellence that is available when you're planning your transition. Get your rebate for that, and once your transition is done, apply and become the safest employer in Ontario. And take advantage of the SOCI credits that they have. What I heard from the CPO last time is about they have $3 billion allocated for funds for the SOCI program. So they do want to see many employers seeking to become the safest employer. The only reason they would not accept you is if you had a fatality in the past. Otherwise, if you are COR certified or ISO 45001 certified, then COR 2020 certified or ISO 45001 certified, then you could apply for the safest employer. Not anyone else is allowed to apply. So those are some things to keep in mind, because it is a journey and it is a proud journey to carry as well. Just to finish off, sustainable ways to transition into COR 2020. Manage your transition roadmap. Identify your resources. Identify if you do need to, align any of your training, because there's a lot of training details that you do need to put in for the actual transition. Document and record control is a big piece of the puzzle that you do need to factor in. So managing your roadmap and having a team to support you with this is crucial. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be doing a few more seminars in the future that goes into much more detail of the entire 2020. But today is just kind of like an overview of what to expect. Thank you
very much, Sobi. Thank you for the wonderful explanation of the challenges. And John, I see you on the screen. So it'll be great if you could share your 2 cents of the amount of interactions that you've been having with a variety of construction clients, especially GCs, subcontractors. The audience that we have here might want to wait for questions coming in. There is a question and answer box, and you can put in your question. We can take them live. You have an ISO lead auditor and a COR auditor as well. John, over to you, please.
All right, thanks, Adi. Yeah, everybody has a different experience through the COR journey. Some people are struggling. Some have teams and resources that have time to go through the journey effectively, but more so are struggling because it's somewhat comprehensive. I empathize in the construction industry, especially, safety professionals or somebody wearing multiple hats as a superintendent or a project manager trying to take on the internal auditor role. It's tough. And you need to create some really defined structures and processes and get everybody on your team that roles and responsibility. We do have a lot of clients that we support for different programs. One being, actually, I see him on here, Marco from Robertson Restoration. I met Marco about 1.5 years ago. And he basically, at that point, he says, we're not just ready to really dive into it. But at the end of the day, we were, checking in with each other, and he realized that is a very comprehensive process. And we are working together to guide and do all the heavy lifting to make sure that there is a sustainable program. Because there's one thing about creating and going through the core process back and forth and figuring things out. But if you have guidance that's already done it for many, many different type of diverse clients, that's going to create a structure, a process that your whole team and everybody can follow. And there's assistance with a system, online management system that support it. And then therefore, once you get accredited with that high score, because our average score of our clients is about 93, 94%, there's a reason for that. And we figured out a really good support model. So anybody on this, and there's a lot of safety professionals, coordinators, and some management on this webinar, if you're interested, because I believe options are always good to have, okay? I'd be more than happy, a free session, complimentary, to set up a virtual, to be able with you and the owner of their leadership team, if need be, to be able to walk you through what we do with our clients from beginning to end, to give you some options to consider if you feel, you know what, I would rather get accredited properly and on time. And so that's what we do. So I know later you'll be receiving an email from our marketing team. And if you're wanting to have a scheduled call, virtual meeting, in person, I'm old school. I'd rather see you in person, and I'd be more than happy to come out, make it casual, and create some value options for you. That's all I wanted to say, because you don't know what you don't know. And so it's easier to, because you have enough on your plate, and especially if people are wearing multiple hats. And it's easy to be able to have some guidance into this comprehensive process, especially COR 2020, right? What you all learn about all the different changes and everything. So we are willing to help you. If you're a GC and you have contractors that you're dealing with, and you're frustrated dealing with contractors that are not following compliance, and you're a safety coordinator, internal auditor, you're doing everything within your company to get accredited, and you're having these contractors that you're like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. What we do with some of our GC clients, they're saying, John, can you reach out to them on our behalf and see if you can actually get them compliant? And and then for the small subcontractors, we have these really inexpensive programs to be able to create some guidance in some safety culture and compliance, especially for training and all different things. So it's going to help you manage your process better. Because once you get accredited, or to get accredited through the internal audit submission, or especially from the external auditor verifying, you have to have this set within your relationship with your contractors. So let me help you, again, give you some options to consider. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to be salesy or create urgency or pressure. I'm just here to say I'm open to have a conversation and provide you options. That's it. That's all I wanted to say, Eddie.
Thank you so much, John. Sobi, while we wait for questions, there are a couple of things I would like to know your insights on. And we keep hearing a lot about these things through our feedback and existing customers, and even in the marketing circles. One question, one of them is, you're an ISO lead auditor yourself, ISO 45001 lead auditor. How easy or how difficult it is to get an equivalency if someone wants an equivalency for COR? That's something that some of the audience, especially the ones who are COR-in-progress, might want to know. And do you recommend something like a WSIB excellence program for subcontractors, or some kind of a program if they are not ready to become COR certified? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if a company is ISO 45001 certified, they can submit. The most important thing to understand with ISO is a lot of people think, oh, I could get ISO in 6 months. It all depends on the scope. Whether it's COR or ISO, as a safety professional being in the field for 22 years, and if you go talk to any of the IHSA's auditors, lead auditors, internal auditors, all of them will tell you, if you are planning on, revamping or implementing a safety program almost from the beginning, the journey is about 12 to 18 months. matured health and safety management system in place, and you are revamping it and then, fine-tuning it to get ready and submit for COR, it could be much less than 12 to 18 months. But if you had a very basic program, you're looking at 12 to 18 months journey. And it's the same for ISO. We are talking about safety management system, whether it's called ISO, it's a full safety management system. You do need to start with detailed hazard assessment. You do need to, from hazard assessment, you need to define your controls. From your controls, you write your policies and procedures and safe work instructions. Then you actually define your training requirements and how you're going to deploy the training. Then do the communication to your staff. Make sure all your employees understand what they need to do to maintain the program, doing the inspections, the various different inspections, daily inspections, hazard assessment, weekly inspections, monthly inspections, accident investigation, hazardous occurrence investigations, continuous improvement of the program. All this needs time to do and collect documentation. Any reviews or changes to the program, you do need to show the program is implemented and that you have enough documentation, at least 3 months worth of continuous documentation for the auditor to assess. So that's why it doesn't matter whether it's COR or ISO, the journey time is same. Going back to your question, Andy, the equivalency part, sometimes certain people will, for the equivalency, what really matters is the scope of the audit for ISO. With ISO, with COR, it's all inclusive. So there's no parts of the audit cannot be tailored to just for one location or head office. When you choose to go to a COR journey, it is your entire organization. With ISO, some people are not understanding the full scope. They try to do just their one location, or they choose to do just their head office, then they're just looking at that particular scope. So if it does not include their entire organization and its all operations that belongs to the WSIB account number, then you cannot get a COR equivalency. If it meets everything, same as COR, then you submit to IHSA the external audit report from ISO 45001. They will go through it, they will validate it, then they will give you equivalency. So I know it's a long answer, but I hope I answered your question. And your second question about subcontractors, since all of them who have joined us today as GCs, my kind advice to all of you, encourage all your subcontractors, minimum, get started with these excellence program, safety excellence program. Because safety excellence program is a small dose to get your safety program in place. So the small bite sizes. So they're giving in small dosage, 5 topics at a time. If people cannot invest the time and resources to go through a COR program, which I would highly recommend everybody to seek for COR, then construction becomes a very even playing field for everyone. That would be my first choice. Second choice is recommend them to choose a provider for excellence and go through the excellence journey. And I know Joan has some solutions for that as well, because we have carved out certain details to handhold small, medium-sized organizations while they're implementing their programs in stages, so that it's done. The challenges that I see in the industry is it's a dime a dozen to buy a health and safety manual or to download a policy or a procedure. It is not about downloading. It is not about borrowing and looking at somebody else's program. It is about you creating your own program that fits your organization. You have specific hazards and exposures. Those have to be captured in your program. If you don't have that, and if you were to have any kind of a serious occurrence or a critical injury, you should be able to prove due diligence. Hope I answered your question, Andy. Sorry, you're in mute.
Thank you so much, Sobi. These are some of the things I've been hearing, and a lot of people want clarity on. And our team did put up a chat message that if you still have questions, there are a couple of minutes, even though we have scheduled it to 11:30, we need not be there till 11:30. Our team has done a fabulous job of wrapping up 1.5-hour webinar in 1 hour. However, we are more than happy to be here if you have questions, and you have the external core auditor and the ISO lead auditor here. If not, you can please share your questions. Our marketing team will be consulting you, getting in touch with you by email. You can get us your questions offline as well, and we'll try our best to get back to you with responses. And there were very interesting things shared today, especially the timelines, Sobi, and the kind of questions employees are asking with regards to timelines. Confusing, but you've given a lot of clarity. And thank you, John, for your 2 cents on COR as a bidding strategy, COR as a business strategy, rather than just using it for a bid, and how to actually use COR to set yourself as a competitive advantage, which most of them are doing right now. And there's one who wants to decide. I hope they've made a decision of going towards COR. So if there are no questions going forward, I guess it's time to call it a day. And
Thanks, Adi.
that's it.
Thank you so much.
Bye
Have
now.
a safe and awesome day, everyone. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you. And that's it from for us.